Hello, everyone, and welcome to 2025. A new year means a brand new season of SuperCoach AFL, the biggest game in town. And this year it is bigger than ever. Literally, we say that every year, but this year we have 31 players to pick for the first time ever, thanks to the all-new flex position. The team picker is open for SuperCoach Plus subscribers. So today we're going to kick off the new year by answering some of the biggest questions we have when we start putting a team together 70 days out from the first game of round one. That's only 63 if we're counting opening round. I'm your host, Al Paton, and to do all that, I'm joined by my very good friend, Dossie. Are we going with Dossie this year, or is it Hayden or Phantom Jr.? What's the correct title for 2025?
Well, Phantom doesn't think I deserve Phantom Jr. at this stage, so I'm working my way back to get the Phantom Jr. title. So we'll stick with Dossie for now, but happy holidays. I hope you've enjoyed this time tinkering away at your team, just like I have been in Team Picker just about every day, making some changes already, up to version 5,364 on my starting squad already. So it's been a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've certainly been that button where you can toggle between the AFL and the BBL and the NBL and SuperCoach has been getting a real workout. But the way those teams are travelling, I'll be spending a lot more time on AFL from here on in, which is fine by me. But of course, we have a very special guest with us as well. He does all those SuperCoach games, produces a mountain of content. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with one of the best blokes and biggest legends of the SuperCoach world, and that is DR of SuperCoach with DR fame, of course. Welcome and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Too kind in the intro, I think, Derail. But look, it's always a pleasure just sitting down and chatting with you blokes. And you'd think I'd be super coached out with all the BBL and NBL stuff that's going on, but I just cannot get enough of the game. But AFL is obviously my baby and my favourite version of the game. So absolutely pumped for a big 2025 season, lads.
And based on the hangings on the wall behind you, everyone's watching this video can see the Lions paraphernalia, which we would know, of course, DR is a big Brisbane man. So how's you come down off the highs yet?
Yeah, I got home about 5 minutes ago, Al. It's been a big celebration, a big party. As you know, flags are very hard to come by, particularly with 18, soon to be 19 teams in the comp. So, yeah, it was a wonderful day, particularly after the heartbreak of last year. It'll be a memory that will be with me forever, and actually got to attend the game, which was the best thing of all. So, very, very happy Lions, man.
No doubt, no doubt. The Lions are going to present some very interesting questions for us in the SuperCoach 2025. So we'll get into those very shortly. But it's going to be a massive year, Dossie, on the podcast front. You're all over it. Where can people find us?
Yeah, Al, you can find us on all the traditional podcast platforms that you listen through audio. So Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you want to get it. We've also got now on YouTube. So go to Code Sports YouTube. We don't have a SuperCoach YouTube. It is Code Sports. So if you do want to see our beautiful faces on YouTube, you can check it out there. But subscribe, follow along. We got so much content coming this preseason. We got a chockers planned for January especially. So get around it and let's get into it, Al.
And we should, I mentioned it briefly, but another plug for SuperCoach Plus, which gets you in obviously to the team picker. A few weeks still before the game opens for everybody. So if you want to jump in early, it's a great deal gives you 12 months and all the great extra stats and content that you get throughout the year as part of SuperCoach Plus. So get involved in that if you're not already. But I thought we'd just start the year with go really back to square one. And DR, you've been doing this for a long, long time, as I have. But do you have a set procedure that you go through every year when you log in for the first time? You see that beautiful blank screen with now we've got 23 empty slots on the field. And where do we start?
We say the same thing each year when the team picker comes out. Christmas has come early. I'm so stoked to see that team picker come out, mate. But you touched on it before. I think the beauty about SuperCoach 2025 and the last couple of years is that the strategies that you may have relied on in the past may not necessarily work with the new rules that have come in. So we've seen things like the boosts, the extra trades, and now this flex position. That's the great thing about it. Even rookie coaches compared to your veteran coaches, we haven't played with this flex position before. So that's what I'm really excited about. And so some of the rules that we may usually take into the season may have to change, but some of the basic ones I think will always remain the same. And I could sit here talking for hours and hours about this, but we can talk about things like team structure, how many rookies, do we go for that guns and rookies approach? Do we go for the mid-price madness? We can talk about players, what type of players do we look for? I think something that's really, really important is to look for where the value is. Where is that potential value? That may come in the form of most likely a mid-price app. It could be a well-priced premium as well as a rookie, but usually that will come down to those fallen primos or those blokes that we think can really take the next step, those breakout contenders. But it can be a very dangerous game, as we know, boys, because it is extremely hard to pick out a decent breakout contender. So I think we've got to look at a number of things when we're selecting our players, from scoring history, new roles. We can talk about players that have now gone to a new club, and that then leaves points for players at their previous club to try to pick up the slack. So, yeah, a number of rules that we can go in with, mate, but I think that some of them may change, particularly this year in 2025. We'll talk a lot about that during the potty.
Dossie, are you traditionally a guns and rookies man or a mid-price madness man, or it just depends from year to year?
I've got a reputation, unfortunately, for being a mid-price man, and as DR alluded to before, it can come with great risk. So I'm actually trying to sort of limit that risk a little bit more this season, learning from my lessons gone by. Probably the thing that I learned most, and it's probably something in season rather than with a starting team as well, is just learning to sort of conserve those trades a little bit more towards the end of the season. Ran out nice and early, so I guess that's probably the biggest lesson for me. But in terms of a starting team, I also like to, and it's a lesson that I've learned over a number of years now, to not just put those basement level rookies on your bench to start with. Have some flexibility, because come round one, you might not get those 99k or those 117k rookies all playing come round one. So I like to sort of make sure I've got some bench sort of bulk on the bench to make sure that I've got a bit of wiggle room on field. So if we're lucky and we do get those basement price rookies, that's fine. But I like to have sort of some job security on the bench and make sure that everyone's not just going to be red dots in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it is much easier, when the teams come out before round one. If you've got a 180k rookie sitting there and a 99k gets picked, you can go down to him and that gives you some money to spend somewhere else. But if, as you say, you've got the cheap guy and he's not there, then you've got to find the money at the last second. That's not necessarily the most fun experience. I mean, I generally take the same approach as you and try and think, where's the value? Where do we think? Obviously pretty guesswork a little bit at this stage to know where the strongest rookies are going to appear on which line. And often it is the back line or the midfield where we think we can start a few of them on field. This year, to me, the line that jumps out, the most obvious one in terms of value, is the forward line. And to me, that was sort of where I was drawn to straight away. And you could fill those spots pretty quickly with some of these guys that we think are going to be super value. Is that a good place to start, do you think, and just lock in some of those guys that we think are going to be some of the best value picks this year?
Yeah, absolutely. And as we know, El, as well, cash generation is king. Dossie just talked about it before when you're looking to select those 99k blokes. If they're not playing early on, you're not making any cash. That needs to be our aim right at the beginning of the season. And I think our forward line, as you just mentioned, is littered with some really nice value picks, but I don't think that you can necessarily overdo it. When I look at structures, I go for what's called a bit of a bitzer structure. So I try to get some really high-end primos in there, and that means that you've got your captaincy and your vice-captaincy options in there. I really think that's important to have at least 3 blokes that you can tend to rely on each and every week. Then you look for that value wherever it's at. But you've just got to get it right. I like the fact that we can select so many value picks in our forward line, but in saying that, I still wouldn't overdo it with the value. But cash gen is king. It's certainly where you've got to look as a starting point anyway.
I mean, are there any primos at all in the forward line? Someone that you would class as a primo that you'd be confident to stick in?
Well, Horn Francis is probably the main one at this point, but apart from him, I go straight down to the list to someone like a Jack McRae at that price. I'm not interested in your Rankins, your Moores at this stage. We've got the opportunity to trade up to them, but I just think that there's so much cash to be made in that forward line that can then allow us to splash that cash in other positions. Maybe the flex this year, that could be a big advantage with some of these cheap forwards we've got.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the lessons I thought I tried to learn from last year, which I kind of got a bit lucky in a way, was not knowing exactly how it was going to play out going into round 0 and those early buys. And I had a team which had some really high-end sort of scorers with high ceilings, like I started a Tom Green type. And I got on, someone like Luke Ryan very early. Jack Steele had a really hot start. And I sort of thought, well, this is what I want to do next year. Is there's not much point picking value and spreading the value over the team because you're getting best 18 scoring in those early buy rounds. Better to just pay up and get the guys who can go really big. And if you've got a few rookies who do not much, then they drop out. Doesn't really hurt you. But then I look at all the value available this year and think I'm tempted to really almost go completely the opposite direction and overload the team with value. And in the end, I think that, last year I sort of thought that was a really strong lesson to learn, in round 6, round 7, round 8, and I'd had a good start. But by the end, some of those players I think really caught up and even went past me by the end of the year because, Jack Steele dropped right off and you might have started a Nick Martin. And early I thought, well, I've dodged a bullet here by people are trading him in and out and he was a bit frustrating. But in the end, he's averaged, he's ended up the 7th or 8th highest scoring defender for the year. So, and I never had him. Some of my guys didn't keep it going through the year. So I'm not sure where that leaves us. Dossie, does that help you at all?
Not really, Al. Yeah, I'm still just tossing up where I'm going with all these picks, but I think at the end of the day, I do like to sort of the buy rounds just does throw the spanner in the works, and I know we're going to talk more about that, but I have seen sort of a tendency to lean towards those, true guns and rookies strategy, and I think probably that I feel like we're going to see quite a bit of variation in teams this year, given obviously the flex position also allows completely different strategies from whether people, and we'll probably talk about as well, whether people want to use a rookie or go with a premium in that slot. But I feel like it's really kind of one or the other this year. You're either going to go full guns and rookies or mid-price madness. And I think we're going to see a complete split in that sort of which way to go in the community. And it's really exciting to find out where we go. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. And it'll be really interesting to see sort of where it falls this year and which way is the correct way after the season's done and we find out. But right now, I'm almost in the middle, to be honest. I'm kind of locking a couple of those big dog premiums in, but there's just so much value. So I'm sort of on the fence in that sense, and I'm going right down the middle.
I mean, and as I sort of touched on before, that, you can learn your lessons, but then it's never exactly the same the next year. And this year, the buys are those early, we have round 0 again. We have those early buys, but they finish, I think, a round earlier than they did last year. We've only got the 3 early buy rounds. So maybe there's less advantage to be gained by, trying to, get a jump at that stage because people can catch up even quicker. So, DR, where do you start with? What I want to do actually is rewind to the rucks because I think that can be. I think the forward line this year is very tempting to just chuck in your McRae's and your Daniels and Bailey Smith, and we want to get all those guys. But the ruck is a bit not quite as clean cut, and you can really send you one of two directions: whether you just pay up and lock away, hopefully a stack of points every week, or do you try and cut your corner a tiny bit and save a bit of money, and that gives you more. Obviously you can maybe pick an extra primo in your defense or your midfield or somewhere else. So I don't think it's obvious this year who the standout rucks are. So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are in that position at this stage.
It's really interesting. I've seen teams with 3 full-blown primo elite rucks. I've seen other teams with 1.5. So, for example, you could go with your Gawn and Matty Flynn as that real cheaper mid-price option who's looking to hopefully get that number 1 ruck mantle at West Coast. Or I've seen other people with, say, a Sherry, DeConning, and then a Sean Darcy in that flex position. So as Dossie alluded to before, I don't think there's a right or wrong way, but personally what I'm looking to do at the moment is select 2 big boys that I really, really like, and then potentially with that flex position, insert someone like a Matt Flynn. So I really like Tristan Sherry. Maybe it's the fact that I didn't own him at any stage last year and he just killed me week upon week. But I think he's someone who could be a really nice vice captain or captaincy option from week to week. And the other bloke that's currently sitting there next to him is DeConning. Now, we don't know if Pito is going to be affecting him. I'm not too sure what the setup is, but this bloke's upside, I think, is absolutely phenomenal. And my good mate, Janeth, who's one of the co-hosts of the Swordplay pod, actually called him a generational type player last year before he got on that mad run. So they're probably the 2 rucks I like at the moment, along with that Matty Flynn in the flex position. But I think what's really important, if you're having someone like a Flynn in that flex position or any sort of ruck, is that your R3 must be a DPP ruck forward, because that will allow you then to, for example, put Flynn into the rucks, you bring that DPP to the flex, and then you can swap them for a forward player to come into that flex position. So that's my current setup at the moment, but I'm sure that by the time the season starts, that'll most likely change like most of my other players will, mate.
Dossie, you were another early adopter on the TDK train, which was a pretty fun ride for a few weeks at least before it all sort of went up in flames. But are you going back there again this year, do you think?
At the moment, I am, yeah. So if he's, as DR said, if we get the sense that Pitnet's, out of that rotation and he does get the reins to go pure ruck, I really like TDK as a starting pick, priced in the low. I think he averaged 101 in the end last season. And when he went on that mad run last year, he was going at like 140 for about 5 or 6 weeks, including a 170, which I was lucky enough to captain before it all went downhill. And I think I got a couple of donuts on the back straight with no trades left and TDK sitting there injured. So he's certainly one I'm looking at. And a few of the other names that DR said as well. Sean Darcy provides some value. I think there's just so many ways you can go in the ruck, and it is going to be another big point of difference as to how you start that. I certainly think the flex position is going to be highly utilized as a extra ruck, whether that is in the basement category, whether, it is a Matt Flynn, or whether you go three premium big dogs, including some of these underpriced sort of premiums we think. I think it's going to have a fair bit to say in the flex position early, but yeah, the rucks.
We can see in the talked about the background there for DR, but from your point of view, sort of at the other end of the scale with all your Eagles paraphernalia. Not that I can speak, obviously, as a Tigers man, but what's your insight into Matt Flynn? Because he's the one that I think a lot of super coaches are pinning their hopes on. If we could get a ruck for in the 200k range, who's he's never been a massive scorer, but if you're playing first ruck, you think you're sort of guaranteed virtually 80 points a week. There's that's a really good scoring rookie. If you think about it that way, and will obviously go up a lot in price, but is he guaranteed to walk into that role at the Eagles this year?
You'd think he is, but yeah, I need to see where they're shaping up in the preseason. Obviously, a new coach as well, what he has to say there. But Matty Flynn, 4 games last year, 9 the year before. I feel like their best team does have him in it and helps Bailey Williams sort of move around the ground. We just don't have the key stocks that we need him to sort of move around the ground. So I project that he will be our starting ruck if he's healthy, and signs are pointing towards him. There's already quotes coming out of the West of him wanting to have a massive impact this year after, 4 games last year and really no impact, having that injury early. So I looked back quickly at his career average when he does get solid time on ground, and there is a decent sample size here. So his career SuperCoach average with 70% plus time on ground is 83 from 30 games. So, given he's priced in the 200, what's he at actually? It's 261,900. That's massive value. And then when he did play 9 games for GWS just a couple of years ago, he was averaging 88. So he's not, he's not a bona fide stud, but he's certainly, capable of getting you 80 plus, which is going to return massive value if he's playing. So if he's selected, I think he's really a sort of a one-trick pony when it comes to he's going to play ruck or nothing. So if he's in the team, he's a must pick in my opinion.
And then now we have a few options. You can stick him as as R2 if you want to really save some dollars, or you've got the flex there, or you could put him on the bench, but it's probably a bit of money to spend there. But that does give us some more ideas to play with, and the other one maybe just to keep in the back pocket. I don't think he's even been added to SuperCoach yet, but he will be soon, and that's Harry Boyd. Is it from the Saints have signed SANFL superstar, averaged about 160 points in the sample last year. So just obviously Rowan Marshall's the main man down there, but one to keep an eye on if we can get a 99k bench ruck who's playing potentially. That could throw up a few other alternatives as well. Although as Theo said, you're probably looking for some DPP there. I think is it Thomas Sims from the Tigers is just about the cheapest DPP ruck at the moment. So there's some names in the ruck to think about. Are we wiping Max Gawn? He's 33, 34 last year, had just about his best season ever. You sort of think he can't do it forever, but that's sort of dicing with danger, isn't it? Especially when the D's they don't have any early buys or anything like that to worry about. So if he starts well, we could all have egg on our faces. DR, is that something we need to be talking about?
Oh, look, never write off Max Gawn. That's one thing I've learnt. Never write the great man off. Now, we look at age, profile, and generally when players get to that 30, 31, we tend to tread with a bit of caution, but Maxi's just a bit of a different beast. And with all the stuff that's happened in Melbourne during the off-season, I think he's going to be keen as mustard to come out and really lead from the front. So it's always a dangerous time anti-potting Maxi, but I think we've got some other options, and I don't think the gap's going to be anywhere near as big as what we've seen in previous seasons. We've seen Max outscore the second ruck by 10, 15 points. I just don't see that this year. And my tip is that he won't actually be the number one by the end of the year. So unlike previous years, I just think we've got other players that could produce as much as what Maxi could.
All right, if we leave the rucks there for now and maybe go back to the defence, and I guess the easiest thing to do when you do look at that blank screen is just see all those defenders that scored so well last year and chuck in 3 or 4 of them, and then by the time you get to the forward line, you got no money left. But I mean, the defenders are tempting for me always because they always seem so reliable. You just think, you chuck in a Jack Sinclair or a player like that, and they just guaranteed lock away 110 every week. Whereas some of the other positions are a bit more volatile. But then I think back 12 minutes ago, and I probably thought the same thing about someone like a Tom Stewart, who ended up falling off the radar. Then he came back a bit at the end of the year, so maybe that's not the best way to approach it. But how many defensive primos have you got in at the moment? Dossie will ask you.
I've only got 2 at the moment, but I'm even thinking about just going 1. I feel like the defensive line has been the toughest for me to decide which way I want to go. If Gold Coast didn't have the early buy, I think I'd just lock away Sam Flanders. But with that incredibly early buy, and it's round 2 this year, so they don't even get the cash boost, or they don't even get a third game. So you're not missing out on any price movement. Not that Sam Flanders could go up much in price, you'd imagine anyway. But yeah, I've got sort of Sheasel and Sinclair at the moment as my two big dogs, but yeah, it's quite a tough line to know which way you want to go, because I just can't see where the value lies, like whether or not you expect like a Jordan Clark to go up in value, or like a Dan Houston at the Pies could be one that could go up. I just struggle to see Wanganeen Miller. Does he take a leap? I'd like to start a Maxi Holmes, but they've also got the early buy. So I feel like you can go in a million different directions in the defensive line, and it's one that Sheasel's just that rock solid player. So I think a lot of people will just lock away the Shees, and then Sinclair we saw towards the back end of last year go ham. So they're the 2 sort of premiums that I've locked in early this year.
What do you think, Dia?
It's a tricky one. As Dos said, with the forward line, I think that's going to be very cookie cutter. I think that there's so many obvious options there at value that we're going to see a lot of similar forward lines. I think in our defensive line, we will start to see a little bit more variation. Now, I've had 4 primos there. I've currently got 3. But what I'm finding really, really difficult in the back line is trying to balance all these mid-price options. So there's 3 blokes that I'm really keen on, and that's Kitty Coleman, Callum Mills, and Matt Roberts. Unfortunately, though, they all share the same buy. So for me, it's probably a matter of selecting maybe 1 out of the 3, absolute maximum 2 out of the 3. But if you're running with, for example, a Holmes, like you just mentioned, even a Tom Stewart or a Dan Houston, they all share that round 3 buy. So that buy is killing me a little bit at the moment when it's coming to my planning. There are so many great defensive premium options. It's just a matter of which one floats your boat. I'm absolutely with you, Dos. Sheasel is a lock. Flanders would be a lock for me if it wasn't for that early buy. Yeah. But if you're not carrying too many other premiums that have the early buys, I think you can probably get away with starting a Flanders. At the moment, I've only got 2 premiums that have the early buys. It mainly even go down to 1. So I could, in my personal circumstance, probably afford to carry a Flanders with that early buy. But if you're keen on players like your Ashcrofts, other popular selections that do have those early buys, then it may be a little bit difficult, I think, mate.
Yeah, well, that was one lesson last year that I think I'll try and take into this year, was that I did start Tom Green, who had one of those early buys, and I'm glad I did. Just because, especially when you're talking about round 2 or 3, hopefully all our rookies are still playing, all those mid-price guys are still playing. It's best 18 scoring in the buys. We've now got you'll have 23 players on field, plus hopefully a full bench just about. You should get a decent enough score to cover someone like a Flanders or a Green if you wanted. I would probably only pick one of them, but it could be a really nice pod early doors. And you've got him when no one else does. I mean, Flanders is his positioning last year was so weird that he played sort of the first half of the year at half back and scored amazingly. Then he went into the midfield and he was great. And then he actually finished the year, played the last 4 or 5 rounds back in the forward line. But in SuperCoach, he's gone from a forward to a defender based on the whole season. So I don't know where he's going to line up this year. But I mean, he scored wherever he was. The lesson we learned last year was it doesn't matter where he plays. He just racks them up. So, he's a very safe, reliable player to have on your team. But yeah, that was just something from those early buys. So I think is it Gold Coast and GWS maybe have that first one.
I think
you could maybe pick one from there.
The reason as well I was saying that I could even consider going less on the primos was to DR's point, on the mid-price side of things, we have some fantastic options, whether you do go with a Mills and a Kitty Coleman or whichever way you go. But then I feel like, unlike potentially previous years, I'm feeling like the rookies could be strong in the back line too. Like, whether or not this comes to fruition, it's so early, but whether we get a Sardell Hooley just in there, potentially on field scoring really well, a Travalia I'm pretty high on coming in and having an impact immediately. Bo Allen should have good job security if he hits the track, running. And then Riley Bice is another one that's rearing his head as a potential mature age rookie. So there's guys right there that are all, borderline basement that could we put them on field, and is it a waste having them on the bench? That's kind of where my early thinking is at. So I could totally see myself running pretty thin in defense if that is the case, but I also completely understand you got to have some rock solid players back there, or you might be in strife.
It's a great
word you've heard out of the Lions, DR, on how Kitty's travelling? Obviously, he did his ACL in opening round last year. So is he going to play round 1?
Should be, mate. So Danny Daly mentioned, I think it might have been 2-3 weeks ago now, that they're planning on him actually participating in the preseason games, getting those, obviously, that match fitness that he's been lacking, and then he should be right for round 1, mate. So looking good for Kitty at the moment, and I'm hoping he has a real impact. And one thing I just want to mention as well, with a couple of players in our backline I forgot to talk about, we've got Dan Houston that's obviously moved on from Port Adelaide. We've got your ex-boy, Rioli, that's now moved on to the Suns. And what we need to remember, when players leave, it provides opportunity for other players to step into the role. So at Port Adelaide, we could have someone like a Farrell, maybe Josh Sin at a cheaper price. And at the Tigers, does your boy Jaden Short step into this role again, Al, and tease us like he does every year for once and every? I'm not too sure, but that's another thing I'm always keen to look at. Who's left the club and who's going to step into that opportunity?
Yeah, I've heard we're talking about some of those defensive rookies, a couple of names at the Tigers that I've heard thrown around as that might be getting some more opportunity for, with someone like Daniel Rioli gone, like a Sam Banks, could get more games and, more kick-ins. Tom Brown is one we've seen a little bit of, so he's not a bargain price anymore. But some of those cheaper guys might get some more minutes, and as we probably all think the ball's going to be down there a bit this year. And Jaden Short's the one, as you say, every preseason he puts up some massive score, and you think he's just guaranteed to monopolise the ball down there. But not quite sure what happened with him last year. It sort of all went a bit off the rails. But he's cheap. I think he's priced at sort of in the 80s or something. So we know he can do a lot better than that. So I suppose the only other question I had around Coleman was, does he boot Dane Zorko out of the back line down there after he so successfully sort of was thrown in there in the last minute and ended up being a huge win for the Lions. But how old is Dane now? He can't keep doing that, can he?
Oh, look, I thought he was going to retire a couple of years ago, and he's getting this I don't know what you call it, but this needling, this acupuncture type surgery, and it seemed like it's worked wonders for him. He was saying last year it's the fittest he's ever felt, but that's Kitty's role. Kitty was really earmarked for that role before he was injured, and you look back to his grand final and his final series in 2023, that was absolutely elite. This bloke was really ready to step up and become a major cog in our side. Now, what happens with Zorko is a really interesting question, because I'm not really sure about what the answer is to that. I see Zorko, if he's in the back line, certainly playing over someone like a Conor McKenna. So is there room for Zorko and Kitty? I think that there could be, but I really think they want the ball in Kitty's hands, because that left peg is absolutely elite. And even things like some bonus kick-ins, I think that we'll look for Kitty to be our main kick-in distributor. So at the moment, I think signs are good, but Zorko, I'm really not too sure on, mate. Even as a Lions supporter, it's a bit of a mystery for me at the moment.
The other name that I was grasping for there for the Tigers is Caleb Smith, who played a couple of games last year. He's only won 21K. So heard some talk about him sort of running around halfback in some of these sort of match simulations. So obviously something to watch over the preseason. And then we've obviously touched on it plenty already, and we sort of move into the midfield. But those early buys, I mean, how big a consideration do they have to be, and especially that round 3 one? And the question here for me that I've been wanting to ask you, DR, since we started this podcast is how many Ashcrofts are in your team currently?
Well, only the one. And it's the newest one. It's Levi. I was dead set sure that I was going to start with Will this year. But again, we've already talked about it so much. It comes down to the buys, to these early buys. Like, how many of these blokes can you actually carry? I'm carrying a few on my forward line, already in my midfield. I'm looking to maybe get a particular player in from that buy. So only one Ashcroft at the moment. And I think with Will, are we looking for him to be a keeper? Are we selecting him as a keeper, or are we looking for him as a stepping stone? I think that at the price, probably for me, I'm leaning towards him being a keeper. If he makes 150K, he's probably scoring like a keeper anyway. So you just hold on to him. So I think that the price is a little bit awkward, although he's got the potential to be absolutely anything. So I'm not completely writing him off. And if I wasn't running with a Kitty Coleman, there's a high chance that he would be in my current side. But at the moment, it's just Levi, and I've sort of ditched Will just for now. I feel terrible about it, mate.
What do you think in midfield, Dossie, in terms of is this where we can go nuts on some of the mid-price madness, or you just have to, lock in your Bond, Pelly, Zach Butters, these guys who are your VC and C options every week, even if you're just paying up and knowing that maybe they'll drop a little bit over the course of the year?
It's really tough. I think it also depends probably this year what you're doing with flex. Like if you're going a big dog premium like Ruck, say, like we've been talking about in your flex, I think maybe you do have to sort of find more value in another line, and that's kind of weighing up what that positional value is there. But I think I sort of still only like to keep to a couple, especially in the midfield. There's so many we can choose from, but those big dogs are big dogs for a reason, and we need at least a couple of those guys into, whether they're your captain or just putting up some big points. I still want some serious big gun scorers in there, and those mid-price guys, they're mid-price for a reason. There is that risk attached. So at the moment, I'm sort of rolling with the two sort of in that, 4, or I've got Peatling and Clayton Oliver at the moment as my two kind of guys in that bracket. And I've got a couple of sort of who I would deem underpriced premiums. So not the high 120 guys, but like a Hayden Young, for instance, low hundreds. So yeah, I actually, talking about mid-price madness, Al, across all positions, I sort of put together what I would consider 6 must-haves in the early January 2025. And I want you guys' opinion on whether you think these 6 are the ones you'd consider, or if there's any others. But I've got McRae, Baslenka, I've put Callum Mills in this must-have as well, Matthias Philippou, Caleb Daniel, and I've actually got Clayton Oliver in there as well. They're the 6 I consider to be must-have at their price. Obviously, it's very early January. Things could change immediately. But then the guys I've got to monitor are you guys like your Matty Roberts. He's under the new Dean Cox regime. Does he still get that high distributing role in defense? Will Ashcroft, as you said, DR, can he be a keeper? I've got him as a monitor. If he's just looking like he's going to be an absolute bona fide premium this year, then sure, let's start him. I've got James Peatling not as a must-have this year. Monitor that. Your Cumming, your Wardlaw, Harley Reid, Will Day, Perryman, McKercher, it goes on. But the 6 must-haves, would you agree or disagree there, DR? Would you take one out? Would you add any in?
I would absolutely agree. The only one that is currently not in my side, and due to buy structure, is Callum Mills. So if Mills had a better buy, I would absolutely say yes with that, mate. But those 6, apart from Mills currently, are all in my side. So absolutely zero arguments from me, Dossie. A very nice list, my man.
Where are you expecting Callum Mills to play this year, Dossie?
Well, I think midfield would be where I would love him to play. And if, to be honest, if he's not, I might also avoid, because I think Matty Roberts and a few others back there, will have a say. Like the Lizard will have a fair bit of distributing role back there. So if he's looking like a defender, I don't know if I'm that keen because of just given how much value we've already talked about. I might just save 100K and find someone else to pop in that slot. But I really hope he plays midfield.
Yeah. No, I can't really argue with any of those. I mean, Jack McRae, I was sort of umming and ahhing. Could we leave him out? He's over 30 and maybe Bevo just saw something that he just didn't, quite have the wheels that he used to have, and that's the reason he sort of dropped out of the midfield, and he's not automatically going to go back to, the Jack McRae that we know that, scores 120 every week. But when you look at the value there, it's just so hard to pass up. And then, I was looking this morning even at some of his VFL games, played, I think, 3 VFL games last year and scored 150 plus Supercoach in all of them. So, and, the role there that he's going to get at the Saints, it's just, you can't see it really going badly. Like the worst case is, he averages 90 and goes up a little bit and then we swap him to someone else. But it's going to be really hard to pass up someone like that. But with the other thing in the midfield, obviously, is where bulk of these rookies come in. And we talked about the super draft that we saw a couple of months ago. DR, who do you like and how many of those guys do you think we could confidently start on field when it comes around to round 1 next year or this year?
Yeah, again, it comes around to your structure, but I think comfortably 3. I've got Ashcroft at the moment. Big fan of Jagger Smith. I hope that he can get some midfield time in that Carlton rotation. It may not be easy, but if you look at his junior numbers and what he's produced, it's just been off the charts. Sid Draper is another bloke I'm looking at. Xavier Lindsay, I think you're getting it around the 150K mark. I've heard a bit of talk about him, but there's so many options in there. You got your blokes from Richmond. How many of these guys are actually going to be starting early on? Is it worth actually spending the money on some of these Richmond guys? Their potential options, and all the way down to, and you've got some DPP, but your Sard is a midfield DPP. Your Bo Allen is as well. There's plenty of options there, but the quality, I don't really think you can go wrong with too many of these players. I think it's all going to be about opportunity. How much opportunity are they actually going to get? Even someone like a Levi Ashcroft, will he be getting midfield time? Well, I don't think he'll be getting too much midfield time, but he's proven that he's such a great scorer and elite player that he should be able to score pretty well wherever he plays. But there's a few names that I'll throw around them looking at anyway, mate.
What do you think there, Dossie? And do you worry about DPP at this early stage? You want to have a link between the midfield and the defence and this kind of thing, or sort of that'll play out in time?
I'm a play it out kind of guy, but I know the more seasoned super coaches out there definitely like the DPP. So I probably should follow their lead and go with a bit of DPP action. But I'm just finding so much value with the pure midfield rookies at the moment. And as we say, so early to know who's going to get the job security. But even guys that aren't in their first year, like does an Angus Sheldrick get some time under Dean Cox? Like there's plenty of guys in that bracket, and going deeper in the draft, like Leo Lombard as well for Gold Coast. Look to have a couple of highlight reels on the socials already for Gold Coast. So there's plenty of options to look at, and it's exciting times. But I have those exact same 3 on field at the moment in Jagger Smith, Sam Draper, and Levi Ashcroft at the moment. So I think a lot of the community are sort of similar position. Just these guys were the SuperCoach Jets, and they look like they're going to get decent job opportunity, whether that's midfield or not. We think they're going to play round 1 should everything go correct from here to the start of the season.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think I've got the same 3, but yes, interesting to how you touched on. I think Melbourne's a team to watch if they give some of these kids an opportunity. They had 2 early picks. Obviously, they do a bit of a manoeuvring in the background to get up in the draft. They're pretty good at that, and they landed Harvey Langford was the other one, I think, in the top 10, and Xavier Lindsay, and both of those guys put up some pretty good numbers at junior level. So if they get a crack early, I think Lindsay, could be sort of the halfback guy to ease his way into AFL, which we love. If it's that sort of Colby McKercher style, slot him in at halfback and let him learn the caper back there. That always is good for us in Supercoach. So there's a couple more names to watch. So to sort of wrap things up a little bit, I mean, we've obviously talked a lot about the buys all the way through as we go through each of the lines. But, yeah, I mean, just looking at it overall, obviously it seems like round 3 is the buy. That's the one we really need to be thinking about, because you've got Brisbane, which we've obviously mentioned when you've got some really good options there to choose from. The Swans, when you've got a Mills and a Roberts, and potentially if we're picking Riley Bice as a rookie back, they're all in defence as well, which is not ideal. And then also we have Collingwood and Geelong off that same week. So, we're probably all going to pick Bailey Smith, we think. But does that really rule out other, especially primos from those teams. Nick Dacos, can we leave out a Nick Dacos at the start of the year? And I've seen a lot of people just thinking, easy, we'll just pick him up, in round 3. But, where do we find 650 grand in round 3 to go and get a Nick Dacos?
Yeah, not easy. I'm really focusing heavily on the buys this year, Al. Now, we talked about 8 teams that have the early buy, but there's 2 teams in particular that I think have a really, really nice buy. I believe it's around 13 buy, and that's St Kilda and Freo. And people ask, well, why is it such a good buy? It's because there's only 2 teams that share that buy. All other buys, I think the later buys, there's at least 4 teams on there. So for me, that brings blokes like Sinclair, your Andy Brayshaws, your Caleb Sarongs, even someone like a Sean Darcy, Rowan Marshall, if they float your boat, they really come into contention for me, because you know that they're basically getting an extra game as compared to these blokes that have the early buys. So I am really in 2025 going to have a major, major focus on these buys. I know we've got the flex position next year on field. There's going to be lots of best 18s, but if you've got a couple of extra premiums when other people are relying on those rookie scores to be in your best 18, I think that can give you a really, really big kickstart at the beginning of the year. So, very keen on St Kilda and Fremantle players at the moment, and trying to avoid as many primos as possible from those first 8 teams that have the early buy as well. And it's all about balancing. I wouldn't not select a premium player that you're really, really hot on just because he's got the early buy. If you can select some other primos that don't have those early buys, then as I mentioned before, I think you can run with a couple of them. I'd probably leave it at that, though. I wouldn't be probably purchasing or starting with more than 3 players that have the early buy, but that's just my thoughts anyway.
Where do you sit on this, Dossie? Zach Merritt's a player that I think when the fixture came out, we all penciled him in because he has all these Thursday night games. He'd be a great VC that you could lock away every week. But then Essendon is playing opening round, so they have a bye in round 5, I believe, with the Hawks. So does that rule him out? And how many of those round 3 buy players can we get away with?
Yeah, I think I just follow what DR was saying there. I think you're just sort of looking at limiting that risk where you can. And, I think given that they are going to play opening round, that's probably where you just have to weight a lot of that on that, unfortunately. So we just have to wait until opening round happens for the early round buys, because I'm generally looking, as we've sort of been talking about value there, and I'm less likely to pick premiums that are playing there. So I think sort of we even got tricked into it a bit last year. I think Dacos had a monster score in opening round, and then he actually had a few stinkers after that. So we thought we were getting a premium, price rise included. He obviously came good at the end of the year, but people that started Sheasel over him definitely benefited early on. And if you started both, good on you. But I'm looking towards just looking at those value players from the early buy rounds. I don't think I'll be really touching any premiums unless they really blow me away with that opening round game and I look like I can't get it, can't go without them. It's a shame, really. The round 2 buy is really frustrating me because I'm looking at a bunch of Gold Coast and GWS players that I think could be really strong keeper opportunities. But I'm just going to bite my tongue and really wait until they come off that buy as well. I just think it's not worth having 2 buys in a season rather than the one. One team that I have identified just early as well, and something else to consider outside of the buy round, is just that early schedule and just looking at the matchups as well. So way too early to be looking at every team matchup. Haven't gone that far, but I was just looking at Carlton and I feel like they've got a really strong early fixture and I really want to pick a couple of players from Carlton. So they've got a bunch of Thursday and Friday games to start the season as well. They've got a Richmond on a Thursday, Hawks, Dogs, Pies, and then West Coast and North, all in the first 6 rounds. So guys like Sam Walsh, TDK, as we've mentioned, even an Adam Chera maybe as some value, and a Jagger Smith. I think a lot of these Carlton players I'm sort of interested in, and whether you're interested in some forward line players as well.
You're picking Charlie Curnow on your forward line, is that what you're telling us?
Maybe. Maybe not. But
you would have to be very brave, especially with all the other options we've got down there. But yeah, you can imagine against the Tigers, and I think he has a very good record. It's put some big scores up against the Dogs and obviously North and West Coast in recent years too. But yes, after everything that happened last year, that would be a big call. But the other issue that we have mentioned plenty of times, but what is your initial thoughts around who you want to start in that flex position? Is it, are you sort of locked into, you want to try and get a ruck in there, or is it just an extra rookie that wherever they happen to be that you can't fit them all in on a certain position? Or have you got a strategy behind where you're going with that? Obviously, again, it's something new that we're all having a crack at for the first time, so we don't know what the best answer is at this stage. But, very keen to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'm currently running with Matty Flynn there, Al. So it seems like every year we just want to select more and more rucks. And this is the first time that we can actually do it. So I don't know if I'm just too excited about having the opportunity to select an extra ruck, but I really like the value that Matt Flynn provides. And I also really love having those two big boys there right from the start as well. So I'm currently going with that ruck setup and making sure I've obviously got that loop, as I mentioned before, so then I can move a forward line player into there. But whether or not that will stick, I'm not too sure. I may even look to downgrade Flynn maybe to a rookie and focus on using that position for some cash gen instead. So currently the ruck, but it may change, mate.
What about you, Dossie? I think at the end of the year, I mean, in a dream scenario, we'd end up with 3 primo rucks. That seems to be the best position in terms of just producing those big points. But is that how we start, or do you come at it from another angle?
I've got Matty Flynn there as well at the moment, and I think if it's not Flynn, it's going to be another ruck. So if he's not playing, I'd even pay a little bit more for a Toby Conway if he's playing, or a Harry Boyd a bit less if he's playing for Saints. Jordan Sweet if he's in there for. So I think I'm definitely gonna go a ruck there. Mainly just because we know, the role of a ruckman is an extra midfielder. They're good SuperCoach scorers typically. So I think there's just going to be too much value for that ruck in that ruck department. And like DR said, in the previous years, we've wanted to play an extra ruck. We've had them sitting on the bench. I just want to use that cheat code and chuck in the ruckman straight away into the flex. So not sure whether I'll be bold enough to go, super premium and have 3 of them. I think if one of those value rucks is playing like a Matt Flynn, I think you're just going to have to go there, or you'll just have them sitting on the bench anyway. So
yeah, I've actually got a little bit different. Obviously, as we say, a long way out from round 1, but don't have Flynn at the moment. I guess haven't seen enough from him in his AFL career to convince me that he's a walk-up start and he's going to be delivering for us every week. But we get a couple of months of preseason to try and answer that question. And if he is their number 1 ruck in round 1, and BJ Williams is on the bench or in the waffle or something, then he's going to be pretty hard to pass up. But I've got Mateus Philippou there at the moment, just all those value options in the forward line. I can't fit them all in, so Flex gives me an extra spot to chuck one down there, and I can pick all these cheap forwards that I like. So, we'll see over the preseason how that pans out, which way we end up going.
Especially when you've got Charlie Curnow at F1. By the sounds there.
Exactly right. Well, exactly right. Now, it allows you to change up your structure a little bit. So just say, for example, we've got 8 spots in our defensive line. It always seems like every year there's that extra defender that I just love to fit in, but I can't. I can only select 8. That means I can now select that extra defender in that flex position as well. So I really love this flex position. I wasn't quite sure when it was first announced, but the more I think about it, the more opportunities it gives us for strategy. Al, you're completely different to what Dos and I are doing at the moment, and I think that's great for the game. You want to see a lot of variation, a lot of difference, and I think that the flex spot will really allow us to do that.
Beautiful. Let's put a little bow on this preseason discussion. I know as we've said, we've been tinkering with our teams quite a bit already. I want us to go through a couple of players here, just one each. A player, the riskiest pick in your team at the moment, DR. Let's hear your riskiest pick.
Probably for me, I've already mentioned him a couple of times. I think it would have to be DeConning. I think now mainly because we don't know 100% if he's actually going to have that number 1 ruck role to himself. Durability, we know that he was injured. You got a little bit burnt by him last year, Dos. You experienced the highs and the lows of owning this bloke, but he's someone that I think has that much upside to him. It's not funny, and he could kill other teams that don't have him. So he's probably the riskiest player for me. Yeah, a lot of it's about Pito, though, for me at this point, mate.
Who have you got, Al?
I'll say Luke Ryan at this stage. Just, I suppose when I opened the team picker and you see all those primo defenders up there with all those great numbers next to them, and I just remember owning Luke Ryan early last year, and he was so good for me. And then he did tail off a bit in the second half of the year. But I think every year I just feel like we come into it thinking, Luke Ryan, he's not going to do that again. But then every year he does it. And I did look up before we came on here. Last year, pre-buy averaged 130, and then it was only in the low hundreds after that. But the year before that, he in 2023 he averaged 120 in the first 8 rounds, and then averaged with 110 for the rest of the year. So you might say, does that make him a successful pick? But the problem is what happens is it gets to the middle of the year and everybody's jumping over themselves to pay absolute top dollar to get Luke Ryan into their team. So are you better off to just start with him and get all those good scores early on when everyone else doesn't have him, and he does have that nice round 13 buy as well, which is factoring into it. So tempted to go there. We'll see if it plays out. But I've got the 3 primo defenders, as they are mentioned earlier at the moment, and he's one of them. So yes, some risk attached. If he scores like he did in the second half of the year, then that's going to have overpaid massively if I go down that road.
Perfectly fits under this category for risk, but also a guy that has delivered massive premium scores in the past. So yeah, you're just paying up, but you're just hoping he can replicate something similar. I've got a Fremantle player as well. Sean Darcy is currently in my ruck position, so definitely a risky pick, but seen pictures out of the West looking absolutely fit and shredded coming into this season. Fit and firing apparently is Sean Darcy. So just knowing what he can do as a ruckman, averaged under 100 last year. So priced, I think what's his price? 529,400. So cheaper than Tom DeConning, a guy that's done it multiple times before, and a guy with that great round 13 bye with only 2 teams on it as well. So look, does he survive to that bye without getting injured? Maybe not. But look, Sean Darcy is in my ruck position at the moment as a very risky pick, but I like his value there. Now, one other player I want to get you guys' opinion. A player that you want in your team, but you can't quite fit him in. You've readjusted your squad so many times and you just still can't fit this player in, even though you really want him. Is it Will Ashcroft for you there, DR?
It's either Ashcroft or Mills. I can't choose exactly which one, but both for similar reasons. And we've talked about the bias to absolute death during this episode, but he just doesn't work for me at the moment. Mills down back, I just can't seem to squeeze in. And then Ashcroft, give him a different buy, AFL. Give him a different buy and they'll both be in locked. But those 2 boys, Mills and Ashcroft, it's killing me. But I just can't fit them in at the moment.
How about you, Al?
For me, it's at the moment that I'm really wrestling with is that M2 position. So lock away Bontempelli as the most expensive midfielder. And then I just can't decide between Zach Butters and Nick Dacos. And I'll probably end up going with Butters, which it seems like nearly everyone's doing at this stage because obviously he's a great scorer. He's improving as he gets more experience, and Port doesn't have a bye early on. So it's pretty hard to ignore all that. But I just think like we are all going to want to pick Nick Dacos in SuperCoach for the next probably 10 years. You can just see him averaging 130 for the year. And it's just, I'm really tempted to just pick him and, back him in and hope that he can it really comes down to that round 3 buy and maybe how many of these other guys we try and fit in from that round. But, maybe you might be playing a rookie on field that week instead of him and other people have Butters and you lose, hopefully it's only maybe a 50 points. And then you've got the rest of the year to catch up. We go at the end of the year, your final rank is based on overall points for the whole season. So even, we love getting off to a hot start. But if I think Nick Dacos can score 50 more points than Butters over the course of the year, you might end up in front. So I do actually have Dacos in there at the moment just because I just love him as a player. Not that I don't love Butters. I mean, I'm probably being influenced a little bit too by the fact that I picked Butters last year and he was such great value and I just locked him away and I never really thought about him. I didn't even watch him that closely because you just knew he was going to deliver for you every week. So it's sort of this year it's not as fun a pick in a way because there's the value isn't really there, but we know how good he is. So it's really tough to choose between those guys, and I'll probably just chicken out and go with Butters by the time round 1 comes around. But at the moment I'm backing myself in with Dacos at M2.
My player, and it's probably no surprise, a player I can't quite fit in, and actually it might be a surprise that he's not in my team given the West Coast the West Coast scarves behind me at the moment. But Harley Reid is one that I would just love to have in my starting team and still may very well get in there. But just as we've spoke about earlier, some of the mid-priced options that we've got and how many of those can you have in your midfield, I've currently got Clayton Oliver in that spot, and I don't think I can have another player priced at 434k that Harley Reid is, but he averaged 80 points last year. I could see that rising up. He's going to be just playing pure midfield. West Coast have a little bit of a better team this year. A couple of new recruits. Does Matty Flynn get in there and knock the ball down to him? I don't know. Look, Harley Reid for me, I'd love to fit him in, but right now he's not in there. So
if we're talking about players from our teams, a quick verdict. Have you guys got Tommy Lynch at the moment? I'm seeing he's become a bit of a divisive selection. It's under 200k in the forward line. Obviously has had some injury issues in recent years, but at that price, you're taking the chance, rolling the dice there at the moment, Dia?
I am at the moment, Al, a recent addition, but I'm just hoping for a nice couple of early bags, and that's all we need from these key forwards, just to send their price skyrocketing early on at the start of the season. So if I do end up going with him, I'll be a big Tigers fan for the first 5-6 weeks, mate.
Not currently in my squad, but he probably should be. I feel like he'll be a very popular pick if his body holds up across preseason.
Yeah, I think that'll be one that we watch those preseason games very closely, and if he gets through and he's picked in round one, I mean, at that price, I sort of feel like there's not much risk involved when, especially when they play the first game of the season. So you can probably put him on the bench with the emergency on and just take it from there.
Beautiful. Yeah, let's wrap it up.
That's a lot of forward planning for the start of January.
Yeah, lots to think about. And thanks again so much for coming along, DR. Now, give us a quick plug, mate. Where can we find you across the YouTube channel that you do and your great podcast?
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. It's always a pleasure. I'm obviously a very keen listener to everything that you guys do every week. So always an honour to jump on board. So thanks very much for inviting me on. Yeah, we're doing a bit of a mini channel rebranding at the moment. So we've obviously got our podcast, SuperCoach Swordplay. We've got our website, supercoachswordplay.com. So I thought it would only make sense for my YouTube channel, which is currently called SuperCoach with DR, to also have a mini rebranding to Swordplay. So we'll now be known as SuperCoach Swordplay, doing heaps of preseason content, all the team reviews, player reviews, and then in season, I've got the stock market. We'll be doing our potty, doing lots of lives, mate. So, if you want to find us with the website, supercoachswordplay.com, or else on X, you can see my handle there. And, feel free to check out the YouTube channel for plenty of content.
Beautiful, mate. Appreciate your time as always. And thanks for listening, everyone, to the official SuperCoach AFL podcast. Check back on this feed as well. Code Sports YouTube is where you can find us, or just wherever you listen to your audio podcasts, you can find us there. Make sure you leave a little rating and review, a rating on Spotify, or a review on Apple, wherever you're listening, and subscribe on YouTube to help the channel rolling along this preseason. We'll see you very soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.